Welcome back to another how-to video by me, FishGuyDan. Today, we're going to be covering grouper. This specific grouper weighed in at about 80 to 100 pounds and just so happened to be the largest grouper I've ever had on my cutting board. Just like any other fish, I start with my 4 basic cuts, the 2 C-shaped collar cuts, and the 2 straight tail cuts. Though, this is a larger fish, so I do have to finesse a little bit around some larger bones, and even though I just right there took some time trying to remove some bones, later on you're going to see that some of them come back to haunt me. And pop! There goes that nice, fat, 20-pound grouper head. He's going to end up in the display case in the next day. So here we're about to start. One note is I'm not used to using my steak knife to fillet fish. The only time it really gets used for filleting would be bluefin. But for filleting bluefin, it's best to break it down in 4 loins as opposed to 2 fillets, which I'm going to be doing here on the grouper today. So with the steak knife, it's not so much finesse as it is surface space and strength. So in certain parts of this, I'm going to have to figure out what knife is going to be suited best for the situation. So I initially try that little 6-inch fillet knife, which it was too short and I couldn't really access what I needed to. So the next knife in line would be my 8-inch narrow flex fillet knife, which it actually did the job. It got deep enough to where I needed to be, and with the added ability of flexing, I'm able to precisely go up and around the spine. But the downfall is it's not strong enough to go through denser bones. So that's why I had to switch back to the staking knife. Unfortunately, I'm in a bit of a rush to try and get this first half off because one of our other bear flag locations was in need of grouper. So this first fillet was about to be driven to one of the other locations. So I had a guy waiting, and I really needed to get this off as quick as possible. As you can see, it's only been about 3 minutes. The downside with that is I mishandled it a little bit, and I created a separation in the upper loin. But I feel that my yield for this first fillet was as best as I could get it. And all I can do is try to improve with future fish. Now, on to the second half. I have a little bit more time. I've kind of figured out what knife I need to be using at certain points. But one thing I did not anticipate was having to fight against the scales on this first cut. What happens is when you cut against the scales on a fish this size, or a fish that has larger scales than your average yellowtail or salmon, is you start cutting through the scales but not completely, and they start to stack up on your blade, which prevents you from cutting. So you periodically have to stop what you're doing and pull the scales off. Sometimes you have to pick them off. Typically what you should do is scale the fish before cutting. But again, in a rush on this one. My apologies. But so right here I switched to the flex knife, which was able to get behind everything and basically cut the skin from the inside out without me having to fight against the scales. Once the skin's separated, it's basically back to your normal cuts. Taking it slow, steady, working your way from tail to head and from the spine, or from the dorsal fin to the spine. And then from the spine through the pin bones down over the ribs and down to the post-anal fin. But what I didn't foresee is there's still some hidden pin and ribs in the head of this fish, which I'm sitting here trying to figure it out. I see one, I'm able to cut it away, but for some reason he just he didn't want to leave. He didn't want to leave his home. So I decide I'm just going to try and move on, but he's just in the back of my head, so I'm still trying to get around him or through him. Eventually I do get it, but with all this struggling, I do start to form that same separation in the upper loin. Right there, you saw one of my techniques where I'm pinching the skin, not the flesh. This way, my thumb's not squeezing in to the flesh and just mushing it up. I'm only squeezing the skin, which I skin the fish once I'm done with the fillet, so I'm not too worried about that. But because of the size of this fillet, just me lifting this up by the skin is pulling the top loin apart, which was quite alright. I was still able to produce some, I think it was about 6 really decent, perfect for the grill steaks. Right there. So I finally made it through the last pin bone, and it's just going to take a few swipes to get down and over the ribs. Looking back, I should have, before filleting the fish, taken some shears and cut the fins off. The post-anal fin. And right now I've disappeared because the kitchen had a few questions about what fish they were able to use for the menu, and there I am. Movie magic. I was probably gone for about 10 or 15 minutes. They couldn't understand. But right back to my station, right back to what I'm doing. And right here, when I flip the fillet over to finish it off, the problem I encounter is where I need to cut is laying on top of this post-anal fin, making it just as hard to cut through the skin. So I have to just kind of sit there and saw at it a little bit after I do a little cleaning up, because right here there's a few tendons and ligaments that would connect that fin to the spine. And once we have them separated from the flesh, I'm able to hack and saw the rest of the skin off. Right here's my second favorite part about filleting, and I even turned the volume up for it. Boom. If you had the pleasure of working with me, I, at some point, will let you experience that firsthand. I kind of get a kick out of grossing people out. Well, thank you for sitting through another live commentary and a how-to video. Please leave a like, a comment, subscribe. Let me know what you guys think. And there is my trophy in the case.